Hello everybody, Justin from Stillness in the Storm here. Today we're going to talk about the difference between seeking pleasure and seeking purpose. Now what's interesting is from a neurochemical perspective, there is a certain batch of pleasurable hormones and chemicals that get released. And this tends to happen when we're doing something that is holistically enriching. So we feel the most alive when we're doing something that is purposeful, that we're using all of our faculties in a dynamic way that allows us to make forward steps in a positive direction. So for example, it feels good to know that you've gotten some accomplishment done. Maybe you are trying to learn a new guitar piece and you've been working at it for a really long time, and then just recently you learned how to play some of it. It feels good. It feels like a mark of accomplishment, right? Or let's say that you're trying to learn some new thing in school and you've finally gotten over that hurdle of, what is this? What is happening here? So in that sense, we're seeking purpose. So what is the purpose that is being realized in any of those activities? Well, we can boil that down. But generally speaking, when we're doing something of purpose, it's because we've recognized some value that we have, something that we take an interest in, and that does something for us in a way that stimulates our value system. And then once we have that value identified, then we create a desire to manifest it. Now, what's interesting is that usually we focus on the desire. So for example, you might value creativity, but you're not going to sit to yourself and say, well, I value creativity, therefore I'm going to go ahead and learn how to play the guitar today, or I'm going to write this chapter, or I'm going to paint this painting, or whatever the creative thing is. Usually we don't think about that fourth step, the value step. But when we're musing, when we're imagining, what we'd want to do, when we're going on flights of fancy, when we're allowing ourselves to explore and play in the realm of mind, then we can make contact with certain activities that when we make contact with one that feels good to us, that's how we know a value has been highlighted. So for example, a person who longs to be creatively expressive in a somewhat artistic fashion, like either music or drawing or painting, when they think about the act of painting, they get filled with excitement. You could say it's like a bliss measure. And then because of that, they're going to probably be motivated to do something with that. So that's how you know that you've identified one of your values. Conversely, somebody who isn't interested in painting but is really interested in engineering, if they were to compare those two activities in their mind doing this exploration, they would probably feel more enthusiastic about the engineering than they would the painting. So once you've identified something that you think you want to do, then the next question becomes, well, what is the purpose that is being lived out there? And this takes a little bit more work. But basically what you can do is you can look at this activity and ask yourself some questions. What is this doing for me? Let's take engineering, for example. Let's say you wanted to engineer a more efficient washing machine to help people save on electricity. Well, why are you doing it? What are your motivations? Is this something that really allows things that you care about, your passions, to come to the table so that you can give expression to them, your values? If the answer is yes, then it's for you, it is going to feel purposeful. And because of that, it's going to be very gratifying when you start to make forward strides in that regard. So we're creatures that are hardwired for attainment, for doing work, for getting things accomplished. That's really important because from a neurological perspective, it's called the reproach mechanism, which I've mentioned in several videos, which is this part of our brain and our biology that's catered or set up so that when we visualize a goal and we move towards it, we get the release of pleasurable compounds that make us feel good emotions, feel positive emotions. So when you're doing something that you feel like you're making forward progress on, when you're learning that piece on your guitar, when you're, to use the engineering example, when you've maybe laid out some of the blueprint, or you've contemplated what the design is going to be, and now you feel like you've got a good idea of what the next step is going to be. In that moment, when you can visualize what the next step is, but you haven't actually made a step towards it yet, that's when you usually get a boost of energy. And that's when you're intrinsically motivated. So you're motivated for your own internal reasons. And then with that energy, now you can go and make steps along that path. So when we're in that state of intrinsic motivation, when we're doing something because it feels like it gives our values expression, then you can make the statement that that thing is something that is for your purpose. And when you walk down that path of your personal purpose, whatever it may happen to be, then it's going to feel good as you make forward progress. Now, what's interesting is that if your purpose is grand enough, if you have a big enough goal, then you can have incremental minor steps or little steps along the path. And that helps motivate you, and you feel good the whole way. So, for example, let's take a fairly lofty goal. Let's say that you have the desire to help other people. You want to make people feel better about their own lives and about the world. And one of the ways you want to do that is to write a piece of music that features lyrics that deal with that kind of thing. So helping people understand that the world is beautiful despite the fact that it may not seem that way. Well, let's say also that you don't know how to compose a piece of music, and you may not even be proficient at poetry or writing. Well, that goal that you just visualized, when you think about it, it feels good to you, right? It inspires you. You have this energy that comes. It's like, yes, I want to help people. I want to help people, show them a better world, that it's not as dark and bad. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this video, that's something that resonates with them. But how do you get there? How do you get to the end result? Well, it takes slow and careful steps of work. If you need to learn, if you want to play music, you have to learn some basics of music, start to develop your composition skills, learn harmony, learn melody writing, probably learn, what do they call it, arrangement, where you take a melody and then you transpose it into various keys and you plane it into above in thirds or below in fifths to give it a nice sound in a symphonic fashion. All right, well, that takes time, right? So just to do each one of those little steps, it's probably going to take you, at least a week, maybe even a few months. So the point is that when you think about your high goal, because you want to, you have this purpose that is really enriching for you, you have to be realistic. You have to develop a practical plan and a series of steps on how to get there. And if you do that properly enough, if you think about the overarching goal, then you break that goal up into definitive steps, and then you take those steps and you think about those, and then you break those up into definitive steps. Then what happens is it's very much like a tree. So I'm going to use my hand as an example here. So you can imagine the goal is the trunk of the tree here, right? And then each of my fingers is like a branch of that tree. So let's say this one is music composition, this one is poetry writing, this one is arrangement, this one is maybe political research, so you can understand what issues are important, so you can speak to those. And then the last one is creative writing. So all of these goals are really important. So when you take each one and you break it down in terms of each goal, then you can ask yourself, well, what do I know about this, and how much learning do I have to do to get there? And then you can develop a plan, a step for you to get to that end, to finishing that one branch. Okay. So let's imagine that this project is going to take you, let's make something really big. Let's say it's going to take you 10 years. And you're like, oh my God, 10 years. Well, yeah, and then you also, let's say that you're really good at planning and you figure out that it's going to take a minimum of 2 to 3 hours on average every day to realize this goal. Well, now you might be saying to yourself, geez, I don't know if I have time to do that. I have a lot of other things I need to be doing. Well, this is where we need to weigh seeking pleasure versus seeking purpose. Now, first of all, when you break up your goal in incremental steps, one of the reasons you want to do this is because it makes things digestible and easier, I should say. So instead of having to learn all of that and having kind of a hazy plan as far as how to do that, if it stays hazy, if it stays uncertain, what tends to happen is that you think about what it's going to take. You become aware of your lack of skill or your lack of capacity to do this goal, and then you demotivate yourself. You're like, man, you know what? I don't know how to do music. I can't write poetry. What do I know about geopolitical events? And you unmotivate yourself. This is what tends to happen to a lot of people. Well, by breaking it up into smaller steps, you can see that, well, yes, it is a big goal, but as long as I work every day, a little bit every day, I will be making forward progress in this goal. But this is where mental discipline comes in, because now you have to ask yourself, is the 2 to 3 hours that you're going to do every day, is this conflicting with something else? Now, I can tell you, for people who work in jobs, usually the case is yes, because let's face it, our jobs absorb a ton of our time. Not only are you working 8 hours a day, but you have lunch to consider, then you have your commute time, then maybe you have kids at home that you got to deal with, then you have to just maintain your house, so you have to go buy food, you have to clean your house. I mean, there's a lot to factor in. And most people only have about 1 hour to 2 hours of free time available to them. So the question becomes, at this point, how are you going to spend your free time? So let's compare seeking pleasure versus seeking purpose. Now, most of us, because we've worked our jobs and we've done all the housework that we can do all day, by the time we actually get to our free time, it's like, oh, I don't want to do anything. I just want to relax. I want to veg out. I don't want to think about anything. And yes, we need our relaxation time. But what tends to happen with that is that if there's nothing that we're doing during our leisure time that motivates us, that makes us feel inspired, then it tends to make the rest of life pretty mundane. Because let's face it, you're probably not like super enthusiastic about working at your job, but you may be enthusiastic about some passion. So now it becomes an issue of, are you willing to sacrifice a pleasure that isn't necessarily helping you in your goals so that you can work towards your goals? And this is a big question for a lot of people. Now, if you're somebody that has not taken a lot of time to prioritize and think about your goals, and this may seem like a new idea, or it may seem strange. But just think about it from a moment logically, from a planning perspective. If you wanted to plan to go on vacation and you knew it was going to take you an hour every day of planning for a week to get to that education, you'd have to make some personal sacrifices, wouldn't you? And at the end of that work, would you not agree that you would feel better knowing that your time and energy was spent towards something that was guiding you in a long-term track? Now, the interesting thing is sometimes people answer no, because they're not in the right headspace to even understand and conceptualize what is the benefit of a long-term goal. But I challenge you that if you're somebody that feels dissatisfied in life, if you feel unhappy, if you feel bored, if you feel unmotivated, you feel like your life lacks purpose, you're probably somebody that spends a lot of time in entertainment land. You're probably somebody that spends a lot of time trying to escape the unhappiness of their life by jumping into some entertainment or some kind of pleasure. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that in moderation, because we need seasons of relaxation and seasons of activity. But what ends up happening when you retune yourself towards purpose is you have this initial phase where you're not so sure, maybe you're not getting the emotional boost that you need. So the first step is often the hardest. So I challenge you to do this. Take the next week and think about what motivates and inspires you. Pick some type of desire or goal that you have that is going to require some amount of work for you to do. Let's say you want to learn to do something creatively. Maybe you want to learn something at an intellectual level, like more about exopolitics or more about health, because you want to help people. Pick some goal. And then once you've chosen that goal, I want you to spend a week spending some amount of time every day focusing on that goal, even if it's just reading articles, but try to have some amount of time focused on it. And then at the end of that second week, I want you to look back and ask yourself how you felt about going through this process. Now, as an important point, you need to make sure when you're doing this second week, you have to have a clear goal in mind as to what you're working towards. So the reason you're reading all these articles about health is because you eventually want to, let's say, do a video about health, and you want to do a presentation about health. Or maybe you want to have better information to give to your friends and family about health. But have a clear end goal in mind, because when you're doing this research work, it needs to be bedded or nested into this goal that you have in mind. And after the second week, I was just mentioning, take that time to look at how you felt. Did you feel as though you were moving towards the right direction? Now, again, the first few days or so, if this is something totally new to you, it's probably going to feel really strange. But if you can manage to proceed on with it, if the first week doesn't work, maybe try a second week. And wait until you start to feel this internal buzz. Eventually what's going to happen is you're going to start to feel good about moving towards this goal. And as a result, you're going to actually, instead of being pleasured by just the pleasurable act of entertainment, you're actually start to feel pleasure by seeking this purpose, by living out this purpose. Now, what's interesting is the more and more you develop this skill, so this is not some kind of magic switch where you start to seek purpose and then the next day, all of a sudden, everything in your life is wonderful. No, it takes time. And the reality is that most of us have not been using these skills in our lives. Most of us have been trained for quick, easy gratification. We got video games, we have TV shows, we have rewards, and all these various things that retune our brain chemistry to seek easy rewards. But those easy rewards are fleeting. You know, how entertaining is a TV show after you're done watching it? It's like almost non-existent, right? But how good do you feel a day after you've accomplished something that you really wanted to work towards? Usually that feeling lasts for a long time, and then you can look back on your past accomplishments, and that'll actually help motivate you. So having a body or a corpus of accomplishments that you've been building in your life is really going to help motivate you towards seeking more and more purpose. And eventually, this is where the magic comes in. Eventually, your purpose begins giving you more rewards than your pleasure seeking. And you don't even necessarily want to seek pleasure anymore. I mean, you still have a range of activities that are really hyper-focused and then more relaxed. But eventually, you know, for me, I'll use myself as an example. When I was a teenager, when I was early 20s, I spent a lot of time playing video games, watching TV, these kind of things. And after my awakening experience, I got really motivated to learn about health and all these subjects because I felt like it was really important that I know them. And I experienced profound pleasure doing that. I experienced a lot of motivation. And now I'm at the point in my life where I really don't have any entertainment activities per se. I mean, I do watch the occasional TV show or movie, but now I'm kind of looking at it from an analytical perspective, like, okay, what is coming through the show? What is happening? How could I use this information to help me? And I've gotten to the point in my life where there's so much purpose seeking that to just totally go into a pleasure seeking phase where I'm trying to escape from my reality just doesn't happen often. It doesn't seem even appealing to me anymore. And you'll find that this happens with you as well. Well, I hope you found this video educational and rewarding for you. Really take the time to think about how much time you spend actively working towards a singular and fixed purpose in your life. And if the answer to that question is not a whole lot, then spend time every day. That's your homework. I'm going to challenge you now. Ask yourself, what is it that inspires me? Once you feel like you've identified something, ask yourself, how can I spend time every day to realize that goal? And then finally, after you've gotten that step done, ask yourself, how does this make me feel, and how can I continue to bolster and improve this? I really look forward to hearing some of your responses in the comments. Thank you again for taking the time to listen and support Stillness in the Storm. Much love, and stay conscious.